I'm so glad you're back to watch another video of mine, and this video is on advanced topics of macros or Excel VBA. In one of my earlier videos, you got to know a bit about basics. Now this video is going to be focused on loops. For example, for next loop, do while, do until, if else, and many such loops that you can build inside Excel VBA and automate your tasks. I try to keep it simple, but if you feel this is a little difficult, do mention that in the comment and I'll try to make an even simpler video. So let's get started.
In this example, we see how to use the for next loop. Now, I'll show through a very basic example, but trust me, as the time progresses and we graduate to much more advanced reporting processes, this will be required. Let's go through the example. In this example, what we intend to do is write a simple for next loop so that I get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in this manner on my sheet. So what I do, I go to developer tab. I can either go to Visual Basic and access the module, or I may go to macros and just type in any name letter A. It quickly gets me the create button on. I click on create, so it has automatically created that module within which a dummy shell has been created for sub and end sub. Now, from our previous discussion, we remember the beginning and end of a macro is what? Head and tail. So I'm going to talk about this, let's say, for next loop. Okay, now I'm going to write for x equal to 1, 2, 5, and I'm just going to put a comment in here, do something. And this entire loop has a head, which I have already written, and it also has a tail, so it should be next. So if I look at the basic code, it says for x equal to 1, then do something about it, then go back and then go to the second instance of x. Do that 5 times and then end the loop. Now by default, I'll have to write some action here. Now this is just a comment. I'm just going to put some action. So let's say I'm using the cells object, cells. I'm going to put x comma x equal to x. Now what does this mean? For the first time, when the x holds the value of 1, it means 1, 1, row number 1, column number 1. The intersection is what? Cell A1. Now that cell A1 should hold the value of 1. Once you go to the next line item, it says please go back to the loop beginning. Now x is 2, so cells x2, 2, which means row number 2 and column number 2, which refers to B2, will then be referred by a number 2. So let me apply this in the test area sheet. Okay, I'm going to press Alt F11. Yeah, Alt F11 quickly allows you to toggle between the Microsoft Visual Basic for Application window and the Excel workbook. I'm going to place my cursor before the beginning of the macro, and I'm going to press F8. So that allows you to run the macro one at a time. As I press F8 and I just hover my cursor on this X, notice x equal to 1, x equal to 1, and x equal to 1. So cells 1 comma 1 refers to row number 1, column number 1. Let me press F8 again. Notice 1 appears. Now nowhere in my code talked about selecting that cell. Hence notice the active cell is still the default one before I started the macro. So I'm going to press F8 again. Notice the movement of the macro, and since it has reached till the fifth item. In this example, we will see how for next loop can be combined with if then else, and that is going to help us do this simple exercise. Now this exercise is where I'll be posting numbers in the multiples of 5 till 40 in column A, and if the number happens to be less than 20 or less, then text called no should be associated with that number in column B. So how do we do this? Well, let me go to test area, and as usual, let me go to macros. Now I already have a old loop written from the previous example, so what I'm going to do is I'm again going to press for next loop 02, and instantly the button create gets created. Okay, so it has created another module 2, as you can see, and it's just a dummy shell of head and tail of a macro that has been created. So now I'm going to press enter, create some space so as to make it look better. So now I write for x equal to 1 to 8, and as usual I'm going to close the tail so the word next comes in. Now between for and next, the action needs to be inserted, so I'm going to write the cells object, bracket open. Since I want them to be residing vertically, I'll be changing the row numbers. And how can I change the row number? By putting x comma, and column number has to be 1 throughout, so I'm posting the hard-coded digit 1, and that value has to be, let's say, x. But wait, if I put that value x, can you imagine what's going to happen if I run the macro? Let me do it. Place my cursor here, run the macro. Notice 1 to 8. But this is not what I want. I want them in multiples of 5, right? So let me do one thing. The absolute values then needs to be multiplied with 5. Now if I run the macro, now based on column A values, the decision needs to be made whether it's a no or a yes. So now, once that is done, against every line item as soon as the number is posted, I wish to see whether it's a no category product or a yes category number. So I write if what? If the number that I've posted, let me just going to copy this statement, if this is greater than 20, then what? And I'm going to close the entire loop with end if. As we know, even a macro has a head and tail, even a loop has a head and tail. So let me just put a tab key, and this just allows me to read the macro a little better. So if the cells x1, basically it's the same cells in which the numbers are inputted, the value, if it is greater than 20, then do what? So the value in the adjoining cell. Now how do I define the adjoining cell? Well, this is row number 1 and column number 2. This is row number 2, column number 2. So what happens, the row number changes, not the column number. Let me copy the same object, paste it here, and just change the column number. And then I'm going to put a value saying yes. If it is greater than 20, then yes, please do give me a value of yes. But what if it is not? So the loop moves like this. If the condition, then do something. If that condition is not met, then do what? Then I'm going to put else. Enter. Else what? So I'm going to copy the same statement which allows me to choose the cell in the column B, and then let me paste it here, and then let me write no. So before I start executing and testing the macro, just let's quickly go through them. Name of the macro, for next loop 02. For x 1 to 8, that means going to run 1 to 8 number of times. Now on which cells? Well, the cells have been defined by you. x1, x represents the first digit 1, 1 represents a1, 2 represents a2, and so on so forth. Now the values are going to be posted in the multiples of 5. Now once the values are posted instantly, it will make a decision of yes and no. So let me delete the existing value. Let me press Alt F11 and let me start testing the macro. Let me stop, and the shortcut key is F8. Notice no, and I continuously press F8, F8, F8 to test whether it's going to work. Well, notice how it's working efficiently, and once the loop ends, it just goes to end sub. So that was the entire set of loop structure. I'm just going to optimize the viewing of the text so that you can take a final look before we graduate to some other loops. Through this another example, we'll see how to write a do-while loop. Now, in column A, you can see certain alphanumeric numbers, right? Now, what I wish to do is write a simple macro along with the concept of recording a macro, whereby next time if I choose a range of data, maybe partial, it lets me remove all the numbers from the data such that it looks like this, devoid of any numbers. Now, typically if you were to do this in Excel through find and replace, how would you do it? You would select a cell, press Ctrl H, delete, let's say digit 2, replace all. Oh wait, if I do that, notice the 2 digit has gone from the entire worksheet. Why? Because if you choose just one cell, find and replace ensures that it happens on all the cells of the active worksheet. So let me press Ctrl Z. Let me do this time. Let me choose at least 2 cells, press Ctrl H, and then perhaps write find what 2 and replace all. Correct? Now, this is the same thing which I want to do through macros, but it should loop through 0 till 9. All the numbers are formed of these 10 digits, and I'm going to do that. So what I do first is I choose 2 cells. Then I go to developer. Then after which I go to record macro, and I'm going to give this name as test01. There should be no space in between the names, so test01 is a continuous string of characters. And store a macro in this workbook. Let me press OK. The macros is already started recording. I'll press Ctrl H, H for harmony, and then I say find what, let's say digit 1, replace all. And it says all done, we made 1 replacement, fine. Let me press OK and close, and then say stop the recording. During the entire process, did you notice that I first chose these cells and then I went to record macro? Why did I do that? Because I did not want my macro to record this event of choosing A1 to A2. Tomorrow, if I want to reapply the macro, my data could be in column C and it may not necessarily be in the same range. So in fact, what I'll do is I'll record another macro whereby I first click on record macro, let's say test02. I press OK. This time I choose the two cells and I press Ctrl H and find what? Digit 2, replace all. OK, close, stop the recording. Now when I go to macros, I have two set of macros, test01 and test02. Let's see the difference between them, and once having seen the difference, let's see how to apply a do while macro to be able to execute this. So test01, let me go to edit. Let me press Alt F11 and it quickly toggles to the window of the Visual Basic Codes. Let me double click on the heading so that I can simultaneously look at the sheet as well as the macro code. And the first one, I just see a set of codes which just says that you replace the one with nothing. But in the next set of code, notice another line item has come which says range A1 to A2 has been selected separately. So now that we know the difference, let me quickly delete the second macro, delete the comments, not needed right now. If I do, I will add them later. Now, in this case, what I wish to do is I wish to introduce a variable which is going to loop through 0, 1, 2 till 9. So what do? I first declare that variable. Now this is something which has been discussed in the earlier videos and some of which will be discussed in the later videos. So in very short, I'm going to introduce a variable, let's say dim a as integer. That means the variable that I'm going to choose right now, which is a, it's always going to hold the value of 0 till 9, all integer. In fact, you can also have more numbers, 23, 31, 35, all integers, no decimals. And the current value of a is going to be holding 0. So I'm initiating that macro variable with a is equal to 0. Now, where do I put a? Well, notice there's a double quotation 1. This is what we had achieved in our recording of macros. If I write a within a pair of double quotation, it will refer to a constant. That means from the word and, or let's say this first word, the letter a will be deleted. I don't want to do that. I want a to be recognized as a variable which contains integer. So since we have declared the variable, I can simply write a without the double quotation. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to punch this entire piece of action of replacing a particular character in a pair of head and tail of what? A macro loop do while a is less than 10. So a is going to loop through 0, 1, 2, 3 till 9 until the time it reaches 10. So do while a less than 10. Now every loop, as we know, comes with what? A head and a tail. So do while, and I'm going to put the tail which is in the form of a loop. Now if I quickly choose a particular set of data, let's see what happens. So I'm going to choose, let's say, these two cells, press Alt F11. I'm going to put my cursor here, run this macro one line at a time using F8 function key. Notice nothing seems to be happening, right? I'll tell you why. Now a is 0. A is 0, hence less than 10. Please go to and change the value of 0 to nothing. But then there is no line of code which says please increment the value of a from 0 to 1. And that should happen within the loop after the action has been performed. So I'm writing a equal to a plus 1. Now again, let me reset the macro. Let me click on the beginning of the macro. Let me again press F8. Notice one by one, all the digits are going to be removed. Then 4, then 5, and of course there is no such digits in the selected data, so I'll have to reset the macro. In fact, let me do one thing. Let me choose the data range first. Let me again press Alt F11, and starting from the beginning of the macro, let me test it one by one using the F8 function key. So F8, one by one all the digits are disappearing, and once it covers 8 and 9, it simply is going to end the loop and the macro as well. So practice this. This is just a quick example of how you may use do while loop along with the simple recording of macro and using a variable to store it. And finally, incrementing the variable by a certain number so that it loops through a certain number of characters. Now these three components are very important for every important macro. That is where you declare a variable, initiate a variable, that's point 1. Point 2, you introduce the loop, and point 3, you use the counter mechanism. In this session, we'll see another variant of do loop, that is do until. If you have understood the do while loop from one of our previous videos, do until shall not be a major hiccup. Let's see how can I quickly modify do while loop to make it look like do until. So I go to developer, I go to macro, I already have a macro written for the do while loop. Let me get inside edit. Alright. So this macro, what did it do? It actually picked up a variable which says a is equal to 0, and till the time a does not turn to 10, you please continue replacing all the digits 0, 1, 2 till 9 and replace with what? Nothing. How do I suitably modify the same macro such that it exhibits do until? Now, the logic it said was do while a is less than 10. So till the time it is 9, it's fine, the macro will run. But the moment it turns to 10, the macro loop will stop. So I'm going to change this do until. And let me read the statement again. Do until a is less than 10. Now let's find out what this macro loop will do. So let me purposely choose a set of numbers which also has digit 9. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write a, 0, 8 and 9. Correct. I'm going to choose that range and press Alt F11. Now one by one let me execute the macro using F8 function key. F8, 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 F8. Now notice, since you have a mentioned as 0 and it has already meeting the condition that is a is less than 10, it quickly goes over to the end of the loop. So what I need to modify in this macro loop is do until a has reached till 10. So till the time a hasn't reached till 10, it will continue the loop. Let me stop this macro and restart again using F8, of course. F8. Alright, so it started. And in the middle of the process, let me also check once in a while what is the current value of a. So as I can see from the key tip, a is equal to 5. Let me run this over and over again till the time it reaches till, let's say, 9. So moment it is 9, do until a is equal to 10. So that condition has not been breached yet. So it continues. Once it continues and it loops over, what is the value of 10? A. The moment a turns to 10, it says do until a is equal to 10. But as soon as it turns to 10, please end the loop. And that's how I write do until loop. So depending on how you place your conditions, a less than 10 or a equal to 10, you might have to apply either do while or do until. So just a simple variant of do while. In this session, we see the example of another very important loop structure, that is for each next. Now, in one of the previous videos, we spoke about a for next loop. In this case, for x equal to 1 to 5, please perform some kind of an action and that repeats itself 5 number of times and then please end the loop. Well, in this case, you are specifying through number of times in pure digits. Now imagine, if you know that in a classroom there are 20 students for sure, you can specify that for each student in the classroom 1 till 20, please do a roll call, right? What if you go to every classroom in a school and of course the number of students are different in every classroom? You can't specify exactly the number of students and your loop will perhaps in some cases be incomplete, right? So let me give an example whereby you wish to loop the activity, the action, or in our example the roll call or the attendance call for every student in that collection of students which is called the classroom. So each loop looks like this. It says for each student in the school's classroom, which classroom? K6, please do a roll call of the student, ask the student name. Once it is done, please loop this for every student in that particular classroom. Now, this has an advantage over the for next loop. Why? Because you can be making a dynamic loop whereby a certain major object contains sub-objects and you do not know how many sub-objects exist within them. So how do I take this example? Let me make sure I bring back those concepts in comments and let me take you to module 2. Now in here, let's look at the first macro. It says for each my cell in the range A2 to A6, please convert all the value whereby you are replacing what? Replacing the hyphen with nothing. We'll be writing this from scratch, but this is just to show an example how for each next looks like. Now do that for every cell that is existing in the range. Now you might ask me, is it necessary that I should be writing my cell? No, this is something you can also write in terms of ABC I could have written ABC here as well, and in here, in all the cases. So it automatically identifies the natural sub object which happens to exist within that defined object. So for example, if I run this particular macro for each, let me run this by simply clicking on the run macro. Notice from A2 till A6, all the ranges, the hyphen has been eliminated, right? Now, I could not perhaps known had the range been very long, let's say A2 to A20,000. So within that range, every cell that exists, in fact, we can also put conditions later for every cells which is blank, then do something about it. So in this next case, it says for each sheet in the active workbook.worksheets, please give me through a message box the sheet's name. Now, is it necessary that you need to give the SHT? No, you could have also given a name WS. A lot of people use WS for worksheet as a short notation, WS. Now if I run that second macro, let me see what I get. Let me click on the first one. Let me press F8 after clicking on the reset button. F8, here I go. Yeah, so I'm getting the first sheet name raw. As I press OK, it gives me the second worksheet name, which is practice, raw and practice. So we will start writing one of these macros with for each and next. This was just to show an overview of what for each means. In short, it means you can loop over the objects in a collection. And the prime example that we took was that of students and classroom. Let's see another very interesting example of for each next loop. In this list, whereby I have certain names, John, Rambo, Sam, Witwicky, Optimus and Prime, of course taken from Hollywood, I have named this range as list underscore names, and that's not very difficult because if I choose a range, I can simply give a name, list underscore names, and press enter so that the name gets registered. Later point in time, if I have more names getting added, I can go to formulas, name manager, and ensure from there I can quickly edit the name. Now the question is, if I go to developer and run a certain macro which I've already written, what it does is it tries to find whether it is able to find the word Sam in the list. If it's found, then it gives me a message box which says found Sam. For example, if I write same, it's not Sam, it's same. Let me rerun the macro, run, it doesn't say anything. So how do I get this macros written through the for each next loop? So let me do one thing. Let me go to macros and let me write find name to another macro which I'm going to write and I'm going to create. Now just for simplicity, what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert a new module, module 2, and we'll write it afresh, find name 2. Right. Now as we remember from the for each next explanation, that it talks about objects getting repeated in a certain selection, and for each of those objects do certain things. So I'm saying for each cell in what? In range which we had named as list underscore names, do something, right? So for each cell in range list of names, do something, and do that next until you exhaust the collection of items in that range. Now question is, should you write the word cell or can you write anything else? Well, you can write anything else as well. So for each cell name in the range, do something and then go to next. Then I write a code of if cell name dot value. Now you can also perhaps write cell name. Let me see, if cell name equal to, and in double quotation I'm writing Sam, then do what? And I'm going to end this loop, end if. So if cell name equal to Sam, then do what? Well, let me give a message box, and in that I'm going to post a message saying what? Sam found. Alright, let me test this macro. Let me go to the beginning of the macro, press F8 as usual. I'm going to hold on to this. See, cell name is John. That's the first cell item in that range. Go to end if, next, again go to next. What is the cell name right now? Let me hover the cursor correctly. It's Rambo. With every passing moment, it says nothing. Why? Because it is not the word Sam that is there, it's the same, right? Let me reset the macro, change the name to Sam, and rerun the macro again. So starting from here, I'm going to press F8 as usual, F8. Now, is the name Sam? Yes. Then do what? Aha, give me a message box, Sam found. And it continues till the last end of the range. Now, after that, it stops, of course. Now, what if I have another name called Sam in the range of 1 to A7, but wait, in my macro it was list underscore names, right? So let me do one thing. Let me go to formulas, name manager, and go to edit, and just ensure that I take one more cell in the entire range of list names. Okay, now once I do that, let me rerun the macros, find name 2 and run it. I'm getting Sam once and once again. So 2 times I'm getting Sam in the extended region. So this way you can easily see how you, without knowing the number of items in a collection of items, you can loop through till the last very end. So for each worksheet in the workbook, for each cell in a given range, do something, and that is the beauty of for each next. I'm so eager to give this project to you. And the data that I've taken is from Fortune.com, Fortune 500 companies. I've picked up the top 10 companies by market value. So in sheet A, I have these set of companies names starting with Apple, Google, Berkshire, and so on and so forth. Now, of course, the data could have stretched beyond the top 10, maybe top 50, maybe top 100. But for our project, I've just taken the top 10. Now, the task is, the ultimate output that I want in column B is going to look like this. You find the name of the company followed by the location, the nature of business they are in, and the market value as on 31st March 2015. Now, if you had to do this manually, there could have been two ways. Either write a formula using if statement, or I could have copied the data, went to sheet B, right click, paste special, and choosing values and transpose both, and then press OK. And this, I had to do this for all the 10 companies, right? So let's see a way through macros. How can this be achieved through a simple click of a button? So what I asked to do is take this data to a different worksheet. I'm going to take this to a new workbook, click create a copy, OK. And I'll close the previous workbooks, whichever are open in the background, right? So I have now one workbook with only one sheet. Let me say I'm going to mark the new blank worksheet as B. So now what I wish to do is, first I'll record a series of steps which later will modify to ensure the entire task is completed in few seconds. So what do? First, let me try to walk through the logic which I would have applied had I been doing this task manually. So I go to record macro. I say macro 1, that's the starting point, store macro in this workbook. Let me press OK. I'll choose B3 till B6. I'm going to copy this, go to sheet B, pick up A2, right click, paste special, value, and transpose. OK. Once again, I go back to sheet A, pick up the next series of names and its detail, copy that, go to the next sheet, sheet B, go to the next cell which is A3, paste special and value and transpose. Okay, and I'll stop the recording. Now, why did I do that? This gives me already a set of codes in the background based on which I am going to modify them and make it suitable for our needs so that it can do the same task again and again for the top 10, top 50 or top 100 companies. Let's see. So if I try to look at the story that has got built up in the background, it is asking me to choose to B3 to B6, copy that, go to sheet B, choose the cell A2, then do a paste special value, again go back to sheet A, choose the source data, copy it and paste it to the destination. So let me see how can I modify this code. I'll keep it side by side. Now the first task is where you tell the macro what is the starting point of your data copying. So I'm going to pick one of these code which says a sheet select. Okay, so I'm going to say sheet A dot select. Next, I want to keep that range of cells dynamic, which means what? That once the Apple data has been copied, then the turn is of Google, right? So I am not so keen to write B3 to B6. That's a very specified range and it's not going to be changing anytime soon. So what do? I write range, open the parenthesis, and I'm going to reserve the seat for the two object cells, and what dot select. Tab key. Now I'm going to try to mimic this action through this line of code, which will make the selection dynamic in times to come. So now this is the starting point of a range B3 and this is the ending point of the range which is B6. So how do I define B3 in terms of cells? Well, let me specify the row number 3, comma, column number 2. For B6, it is going to be row number 6, column number 2. Now this line and this line means exactly the same. So what do? I'm going to copy that data. I'm going to just paste it here. So I'm trying to follow the same sequence of action. Now, once you've copied the data, what I want is I will choose sheet B, and then I wish to replicate the same logic out here through range cells object. So let me copy this just to save time, paste it here. Now how do I replicate A2? A2 means what? Just one cell. But whereas I need to paste the data in 4 cells in a transposed manner. So if I look at sheet B, it's starting from A2 till D2. Alright. So the definition of A2 in terms of row number is 2. Okay. And column number is 1. For D2, it's row number 2 as usual and column number 4. And what do I do thereafter? I'm going to paste that thing in here. Right. Now, let's try to look at the entire series of codes just to see how can I make it even more dynamic so that it returns back every time the data has been pasted. Alright, so the first time we picked up the series from B3 to B6. The next time we are supposed to pick up from B8 to B11. Now if I have to write this, I'm just posting it out here, making some space, writing it. For the time being, close this window. So that gives us more space to look at the code. Now, the next time it should start from B8, which means what? Row number 8, column number 2 as usual. And it should end at 11th row. So row number 11 and column number 2. Now, if you look at the pattern, 8 plus 3 is 11. 3 plus 3 is equal to 6. So basically this has a mathematical association, or you can say a trend, whereby this plus 3 is the row number starting, right? Okay. And the next point you'll notice is the starting point is going to be 3, 8, 13, 18, increasing by 5, 5, 5, 5 each. So let me do one thing. Let me introduce a variable here. Let's say letter K. Okay. If K is there, then how do I set the value of K? K is going to be what? 3. Now, if K is 3, then this should be K plus 3. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to make one generic line of code which works for all instances of Apple, Google, Berkshire, and so on and so forth. Now, K, once the data has been copied, it will be pasted to a destination cell, I agree. But once it's pasted, the revised value of K should be increased by 5. So I write K equal to K plus 5. Fine. Now I need to enclose that in a pair of a loop. So do while, as of now I'm just putting an arbitrary number, K is less than 1000. Of course I'm going to change that with a proper logic. As of now I'm just putting the loop in. So what happens now is it's going to run the loop, change the value till the time K is less than 1000. But wait. If I do execute this statement, the data will be copied, will be of Apple, Google, Berkshire, but they all get pasted at the same location. What I want is in sheet B, the next time the data gets pasted, it should be in what form? Let me specify. What if it's A3? A3 means what? Row number 3, column number 1, and D3 will be what? Row number 3, column number 4. Notice the 1 and the 4s are not changing here. What's changing is the row number increasing by 1. So let me do one thing. Let me introduce one more variable, t equal to 2, and once the process is completed, it should increase by 1. So that's where I put it, t equal to t plus 1, enter. Of course I'm going to declare the variable scope dim k comma t as integer, right? So let me just quickly walk through it. Okay, till the time K doesn't reach 1000, you are going to go to select sheet A, pick up certain cells, copy them, go to sheet B, select a group of cells and paste it. Once pasted, change the variable and loop that again and again and again. In fact, let me just make sure this is less than 100. And now let me delete the rest of the code which got recorded while we had done record macro. Alright, so let me go choose the sheet B data. Delete them. Now let me run the macro starting from the beginning. Yep. It took some time. Why? Because I had set a very high value. K is less than 100. And it has copied the data and pasted in sheet B in the way that I wanted. Notice. Now this is a very crude macro, but nevertheless it gets the job done. Had the data been even larger, maybe top 50 companies, it would have taken almost the same time. Now sometimes when you are trying to run a very big macro, the screen will flicker. It will continue to flicker. Why? Because it's updating the screen. So what I would want to do is, while the macro is running, the screen updating object, the property of it should be turned to null or false. So application dot screen updating equal to false. So if there any flickering that would have happened in your screen will not happen at this moment. Let me do one thing. Let me close this window, go sheet B, delete them. And just as an example's sake, I'm going to copy Apple once again and paste it below Facebook, right? Now, whichever sheet I'm in, I'm going to go to macros and run the macro. After a point in time, notice Apple appearing first time and the last time. Now, you might ask me, look, I do not want this percentages. Of course, if you don't want this percentages, I can use a text to column to segregate them and delete them. This time, let's learn the basics about with and end with statement. Well, in this case, I'm going to write a code which will simply change the property of cell A1 to bold and italics. Now, let me show you the two various approaches with which it can be achieved. The first approach is where I might select one cell, A1, select it, and with the selection, I'm changing the property of a font and making sure it is bold and also italic at the same time. Whereas, if I use the with and end with statement, which is super intuitive if you start reading it out, it says with the object cells, the property of which is font, and I wish to change the parameters of bold and italics to true. In the first case, notice for every parameter that I wish to change for the property font, I am changing and writing that one at a time. Whereas within the second approach, I am just mentioning the parameter which I want to change with the precedent dot, and dot bold equal to true equal to true. So just like a loop which starts with the head and ends with a tail, I will have with statement, that's the start of the head, and the tail says the end with statement. To understand with and end with block statement a little better, let's take an example. This case, I have a couple of cells with, of course, filled up with the same text, YOYO. And what I wish to do is, I wish to record a macro. The macro shall choose the entire sheet and make everything bold and italics, maybe even underline. Now, let's see, first we do this through record macro, and once we look at the code, we'll see how to convert that into with and end with block statement. So I go to record macro, macro 2, in fact let me give this a name test, and let me press OK. I'll choose the entire sheet, that's first action, Control B, that's for making it bold, and then Control I for making it italics, and finally Control U to make it underline. Quite often you do that with some font properties so that the sheet contents are all consistent with one common format. Now once I've done the three actions, let me click on stop recording and I'll go to macro, pick up the test, I'll go to edit. Now when I look at the code, the one which I have called as test, notice it is choosing the entire sheet, the entire cells, and then it is making the properties parameter as true, and in this case underline. So bold, italics, underline. Now, how do we optimize this code with statement? Well, let's see. First, I'll keep this code intact, cells.select, and then I'll say with selection.font, since it's a font property which I'm targeting, and I'll end the statement with end with. Now, within that, the property which I'm targeting is bold. So let me paste that there. Dot italics equal to true. Okay, goes in there. And dot underline equal to underline style single. Let me paste it below this line code. And let me commentify this. Now it's exactly the same thing which is it going to do. Let me just test this though. Let me make sure Control B, Control I and Control U has been pressed to nullify the effect, and go to macros and let me choose test, run. Exactly the same thing. So the second way is much faster in case there are more complex codes involved within these set of logics. This time we learn about select case. It's one of those instructional blocks which lets you evaluate different cases based on user input and lets you decide what to do next. It's very similar to if and else if, because even in if and else if you are given a lot of conditional statements. If x is less than 100, do something about it, else do something else. Well, something similar. Now let me show you one example first. In the yellow cell, let me write a number, let's say 35, and since the score is less than 40, if I click on the button grade, it says fail. How about if I write 99, which is very good score out of 100? I'll click on grade button and it says pass with first division. How about 55? Well, that also passed, but with second division. So let me look at the code that has been generating these kind of responses. Let me go to Visual Basic and I have removed the properties windows and the project explorers. What I want us to do is simultaneously look at these cells and the cases that are being evaluated. So the first statement that I see is select case and end select within that loop. Now, how is it going to work? Well, the select case statements ends with the score. That's one of the variable which I've declared. Now, that score is the cell A1, as I can see from the statement. So whatever the score is, for cases 0 to 39, you are going to evaluate it with a message saying status being fail. And what is status? Status is the cells 1 2, which means what? B1. We'll be writing this from scratch, but just to give an overview what's happening in the background, it is evaluating case by case in different block items. So there are in total 4 sub blocks: case 0 to 39, 40 to 59, 60 to 100, and anything else. Across them, I have given messages fail, pass division 2, pass division 1, and finally error. And all this is happening within the select case block. So this is what we will be trying to do. We'll be trying to writing this in our Visual Basic window from scratch. In the continuation with the previous project where we were looking at one of the cases of select case studies, we'll see how to populate one from scratch. So the placeholder for the student is 56 in the cell A1. In fact, if I look at it from a row and column perspective, it is row number 1, column number 1. The next cell where I want the status update is the next adjoining cell, which is row number 1, column number 2. So let me go to developer, let me go to macro, and let me just write a random data A, and that will help me get this button create. Instantly, it goes to the sub procedure which has been created. For the time being, let me do one thing. Let me go to insert and insert a new module. And where do I see all these modules? Well, let me activate the project explorer, view project explorer. So I have the module 2. All right. So sub, and I write test2, in fact test score, and open and close the parenthesis, enter. You have the end of sub procedure. So let's say if I write select case score, and I'll write end select. Now, this has to be some value which can be evaluated within this instructional block, correct? So what is this score? Well, score is going to hold the value which is provided in which cells, and I'm writing 1, 1 indicating A1 dot value. Have I declared the variable? No. So dim score as integer, since it intends to hold the value of integer. So now we write for case 1, in fact let me start with 0 to 39. I want to do something, right? Then of course I'll be doing something else for case 40 onwards till 59, maybe 60 onwards till 100. So now let me think about posting the correct messages under different cases. So for case 0 to 39, let me post a message in the cell B1, and that I'm defining via this method. Cells with row 1, column 2 should hold the value. What value? Well, the status is fail, and let me double quote close it. As of now, let me just put a value, let's say 999, and let me just test this entire macro right now. So I go to macro, in fact let me write a number 33, and let me delete this fail. I'll go to macro and go to test score and run this. Yep, I'm getting the message. So now let me continue this all along. So macros, test score, edit. Now let me give the appropriate number for the first case, select 0 to 39. Okay, the next case study is based on what value? Well, I can think about 40 onwards till 59. And once more, I'm going to copy paste this and paste it here. And this is going to be what, 60 to 100. And case else for any residual values which may have been provided. So now let me change the messages. So I'm saying clear or pass with first division. I'm going to copy this message against the next case, that is second division. In fact, it should have been reversed, second, and this is the first division. For everything else, I'm going to give the value as an error. Okay, let me just copy this correctly, paste it, and I'm just going to give a message error. Please check again. Right now, what else? Let me just see if I have missed any of the variables which needs to be declared. Well, the only variable I've used is that score, and that is based on the value of A1 already declared. And have I taken all the cases 0 to 39, 40 to 59, 60 to 100, case else, and then end select. If I wish, I can delete all these extra spaces. And now let me test this. Wow, how about if I give 100 and if I click on macro and test score run this? Clear with first division. In fact, let me make it convenient by placing a button, and that button might ask me which macro needs to be associated with it. So I'm choosing test score, and I'm just going to click on this text box and write update. Alright, so now if I give any kind of score and click on update, changes the value. Super. So that was an example of select case.
Wow, you finished up till here. I'm so happy. I would love to know your feedback on how did this entire learning session go. And along the path, if you learned something new and relevant, something that you can put to use, or you may be trying to learn that topic for quite long, but somehow the videos outside in the YouTube could not help you. So do mention your feedback, and I'll see you in the next video. This is Rishabh from Yoda Learning Academy, and signing off.